Mythbusters, not the bald one who wears the hat, but the other one, he once said, "The only difference between screwing around and science is writing it down." And as he's saying that, he's holding up a clipboard where he's recorded some data. So, is it true? Is he right? Writing it down. Is that what it is to be a scientist? Well, I think you know. Sadly, no. The Mythbuster who doesn't wear a hat is wrong. It's not that easy. In fact, I think it's pretty hard, and I'm not just saying this. I'm going to try to convince you of it, but I've only got a few minutes. However, I have an advantage. You see, you in this room are here precisely because your teachers and your peers already see the scientist in you. So I suspect that you'll already know a bit of what I'm about to tell you. To be a scientist, and I mean to be a really good scientist, is to be very, very, very good at giving up. Somewhere a trained and licensed motivational speaker is shaking her head at what I've just told you. But the first part of giving up happens in the classroom. You have to give up your shame. I actually learned this just recently, and I really wish I'd learned it sooner. So on Wednesdays, I teach mathematics in the prison. I drive out to the state penitentiary on Highway 14. I show an ID at the gate, and then I drive about a mile more before I pull into the parking lot at the Level 5 facility. It's dusty and wide open between the buildings, and they really look like little fortresses, fencing and razor wire. Through the metal detector, through 3 security doors, and then 2 padlocked fences and 2 more security doors, and then I get to see my first student. He spends 19 or so hours a day in his cell by himself. Now, I don't know why he's there, and I don't really want to know. But when we work on math together, he's standing on one side of the door, and I'm standing on the other. I've got a clipboard and my pencil and paper, and he's standing on the other side. He's got a chessboard leaned against his hip, and he's got some worksheets on it. We've got a skinny rectangle of reinforced glass between us, and we have to shout to hear each other through the door. Now the shouting is really important because it means that everyone in the block can hear us. When one of my guys makes a mistake and I help him through it, everyone knows. When he says that 4 to the 3rd power is, let's see, 4 times 4 is 16 times 3 is 48, and I ask him to reconsider to find the mistake, he has to do it again, out loud, and everyone hears him. But let me tell you something. This guy that I worked with this afternoon is going to finish his GED because he doesn't care what people think about him. He's thinking out loud, and as a result, I can hear what goes wrong, and we can work it out together. Everyone else can hear what goes wrong too. And it doesn't matter. At all. The mistake and the new knowledge belong to him. It's complete shamelessness, and it's so key. I didn't realize it before. Like if he was feeling bad about not knowing something in front of others, or in front of himself, it just wouldn't work. When he gets things wrong, it doesn't hurt him at all. He's driven by learning. He's driven because he's humble. And it doesn't matter if he sounds dumb in the process. Because the fact of the matter is this, he doesn't sound dumb at all. He sounds like a student. He sounds like someone who's excited to learn, someone who's hungry to learn. So, it's possible, that there will come a time when you say, or you write, or you do something, and despite your best intentions, you may be inclined to feel dumb in front of others or inwardly in front of yourself. And I'm telling you now that you need to give up that shame. You need to give up feeling bad for not knowing something. Now, I'm not telling you to make excuses. I mean, if you don't know an answer, find out the right answer and just gobble it up. Figure out where your exams went wrong, and so on. But give up on shame. You have to move beyond it. And ideally, I think we all get to a point where it doesn't even occur to us to feel that way. I think this is key to learning, actually, and to creating spaces where other people feel safe learning too. Like what a gift it could be to help the people around you give up on their shame just because of how you are. So I can't believe that it really took me this long to figure it out, and so maybe if I tell you, it won't take as long for you to learn as well. But the second part of giving up is giving up on your interest, giving up on the answer that you wanted. So when you conduct an experiment and you report your findings, you're supposed to be entirely disinterested of what happens. So disinterested is a funny word. It's not the same as uninterested, which means bored or unconcerned. Disinterested means that you have no stake in the outcome. You're impartial. Even when you care very, very, very much, you're impartial. So recently, this was hard for me. We were studying the complex patterns of how people become professors. You might expect certain things to make a difference in who becomes a prof and who doesn't, right? Like, for example, getting a PhD from a top-notch institution, sure, that should make a difference. Writing more scientific papers, like, of course, that should also make a difference. Being a man versus a woman, we hope that doesn't make a difference. If your gender affects whether or not you get the job, that's discrimination. Science is supposed to be a meritocracy. But at the same time, only 20% of computer science professors are women. So what gives? Well, we read about discrimination in hiring quite a bit, and we wanted to find out here, where in the hiring process does discrimination enter the picture? Because if we can find where it enters, maybe we can solve some of these problems. So we collected data. We collected a ton of it. 19,000 resumes of professors around the US and Canada. We wrote down where they got their PhDs, where they got their professorships, their gender, geography, training, and the list goes on. And we expected to see that gender would make a difference, and in fact, we hoped that we would find exactly that difference. I mean, if we can point to that discrimination, then we can fix it, right? Well, when our statistical modeling was complete, we found that we could predict who did and didn't get jobs just as well when we included gender in the model as when we didn't include gender in the model. In other words, gender didn't seem to make a difference. So like we hear about gender discrimination and harassment quite a bit from professors and researchers and students and so on. And it's important. And we have a very strong prior reason to believe that the system of hiring treats men and women differently. So we collected the data, we ran the experiment, and voila, we see no difference. So this is where it's very, very hard to be disinterested. Right? Like we could have continued to search for patterns of discrimination. We could have, as they say, massaged the data. But the hardest thing was to walk away from the answer that we wanted. To walk away from the results that we wanted, and to listen to the data tell the story. So you want to know how the story ends? Of course, we had to check our work. And once we had thoroughly checked our work, we actually had to believe the results that were in front of us. We had found that on average, men and women are treated the same by the hiring system. Okay, on average. To get an average, that means that you have some points that are above the average, some points that are below the average, and together, that's what makes the average. So this caused us to investigate which universities hire more women than our model predicted, which universities hire fewer, and together they produce the average. So the result? We found that the elite universities appear to be really, really competing with each other to hire the best and brightest female PhD graduates. In fact, they appear to be competing so fiercely that it's hard for the less elite universities to keep up. These implications are exciting. It means that the computer science departments are really trying to change their problems of underrepresentation. They're actively competing to hire the very best, and they're trying to transcend their past. Now we're looking at how professors get promoted, and once again, I'm sure that if we were going to get the wrong answer again, if we stubbornly refuse to give up on the results and answers that we expect to see going on. I think the most beautiful stories of science are the ones where the unexpected happens. Where the mission is to find X, and instead we find Y. And this only happens when we give up on the results that we hope for, and instead open ourselves to what the data actually say. Okay, you've been listening to me for a while. I appreciate that. Let me tell you the last thing. Okay, the last thing that you have to give up as a scientist is faith. And I don't mean religion. I mean faith as in blind trust. You have to be doubtful, and you have to be skeptical. Carl Sagan said it in a very pithy way. Science is a culture of doubt. Now, someone can be an authority, very important and very prestigious, but they can make mistakes just like the rest of us. So here's a story that has a bad middle, but a really nice ending. In 2010, an economics paper made a really big splash. It was called Growth in a Time of Debt. It basically said that if a country's debt grows to be sufficiently large relative to the size of the economy, that country's economy is going to grow more slowly. In fact, maybe much more slowly. So this was a bomb. The world in 2010 was still in an economic crisis, and governments were trying to figure out whether they should spend money to keep their economies afloat or cut spending to keep the debt in check. Then this paper landed in the most prestigious economics journal, and it was written by 2 Harvard economists. If you're going to have faith in the findings of any study, it seems like this would be the one to choose. Now, politicians around the world, and I really mean like all around the world, reacted to this. Because this study had just written a prescription for policy. cut the social safety net, cut spending, or else. And sure enough, governments, especially in Europe, enacted measures of economic austerity. People were left out of work and really struggled, but it was for the greater good, right? I mean, the economics paper said so. Okay, in 2013, a student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst named Thomas Herndon got interested in this paper, and he tried to replicate their findings. This guy had no faith in Harvard or the American Economic Review. No faith at all. And good for him. He had no reason not to believe that the findings were true, but he wanted to be sure. He was skeptical. Well, it turns out that he uncovered some mistakes in a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. The Harvard economists had written some formulas wrong. Their numbers and findings had to be revised, and in fact, toned down as a result. These findings and their revision impacted the way that governments spend and don't spend the money they collect in taxes. Careful skepticism by a student won out. Herndon didn't blindly trust a prestigious publication from prestigious authors. He trusted the data, and as a result, really made an impact while a student in his 20s. Okay, so I'm telling you that it's important to give up, and maybe I'm being intentionally iconoclastic. Like telling you that you should give up on shame and interest and faith. So maybe let's be positive about these things. You've got to transcend your ego and never feel bad about not knowing something. You've got to see what's truly in front of you, not what you want to see. And you've got to find out for yourself and skeptically search out the truth, even if it means disbelieving some folks in the process. In fact, maybe I'm one of those folks. Like, I encourage you to not just believe what I've been telling you for the past 10 or so minutes, but instead explore for yourself. And really, like, what a beautiful paradox, that when I tell you to not believe what I say, you've got to believe what I say in order to not do so. My hypothesis is that you're going to find it hard, and I mean really hard, to step past your own ego, to get away from the results you expect or want to see, and distance yourself from blind faith. But I think that's what it is to be a scientist. There's never enough time. Thank you for yours.
Is everybody inspired?
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. All right, well, that concludes our evening. We have some refreshments out in the lobby, and I hope you all mingle and meet each other. For the students, I ask you to stay there. We're